Welcome to Global View. Joining us today is a very special person with an incredible story. Her name is Tara Reade, a current RT contributor and author and former Senate aide for Joe Biden. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Ciao, bellissima. You are in Italia.
Yes, we are from European continent.
Parlo poco italiano. Mi piace Firenze, Verona. Bellissima.
Yeah. Bellissima, il tuo accento. You speak perfect, and I am trying to continue the show in Italian.
I think we should just continue it in Italian. Let her.
George is also improving. I mean, now his Italian is completely fluent.
I wish. But...
Yes. So it's such a pleasure to see you here. With we are on the same continent. So this insane continent. In some way, on this side, on the west side, we became a colony of the United States. So we will talk about that later. And, you have an incredible story. And I would love you to tell this story, but starting from a very impressive press release about your lawsuits for being sexually harassed, the victim of sexual harassment by Joe Biden, former president of the United States, at the time was a senator in the United States. And this lawsuit, for the first time, names Jill and Hunter Biden as liable for every request you're addressing to the DOJ. So I want you to, I know your story is very public, it's very famous at the time for those who didn't understand the depths of the damage that has been done, and I hope they will pay for. And so I'll let you tell your story and how we got to this press release today.
Well, you gave a perfect introduction. Thank you so much. And really, it started in 1993 when I was, well, even further back. I worked for Leon Panetta before that, and I kind of got a taste of what was going on in our government and working for Democrats at that time. I also worked in congressional races as an operative, and then worked with Joe Biden as an aide. And what I can tell you is that I did not even understand what I was getting myself into when I worked for Joe Biden until it started kind of unfolding. So it started with sexual harassment, and then the crescendo was a sexual assault that happened at the Capitol. And I was very fearful to report it. My mother at the time, however, was so indignant, she called Larry King. So people can look online and find the Larry King call where my mother called about that. And I told some people, my brother, my mother, and then a good friend who worked for Kennedy at the time, Ted Kennedy. And so people knew. And throughout history, I have like 8 contemporaneous witnesses throughout the years that I had told about the sexual assault and just the damage psychologically and physically that was done to me by Joe Biden, and the threats that I was under. And I didn't go to the media until 7 other women came forward. I was one of those, about Joe Biden's inappropriate behavior. And that was in 2020. And when I did that, immediately, even before out the gate, it was in a local paper before it went national, I was called a Russian asset, even though I had no ties to Russia. I had given an interview in 2019 where I had said that I thought that Vladimir Putin was one of the greatest presidents, world leaders of our generation, because of the way he had taken Russia and built it to a superpower over the years. And so it was a very non-emotional kind of thing. It was just an observation that he was very skilled, a very skilled world leader. That was kind of twisted along with some writing, creative writing that I was doing, and they just called me a Russian asset. And what was interesting about that was that when the New York Times called Joe Biden's campaign, the reporter told me that they did not deny it. They simply sent my comments about Russia and in defense. So they were really heavy. And we all know now that the Russophobia that Russiagate was all a hoax. And it was a hoax that was, made up by these elite Democrats at the time. And in my case, they weaponized it to try to discredit me. So, you have both been through a lot. You understand what it's like to be discredited by the Western legacy media when the elite neoliberals don't want you to speak or to have an opinion publicly, and they go after you. And what they do is try to go after you with the media, discredit you, and then they try to bankrupt you, try to put you in prison. And if that doesn't work, it escalates from there. And in my case, it did escalate. I was harassed. My family was harassed. My pets were threatened. My family was threatened. My horse was almost kidnapped. I had this horse that was almost taken by someone. And meanwhile, I was, just trying to tell the truth about what Joe Biden did to me. When I had gone to Time's Up, which was a legal nonprofit that was, at the time worth millions by Hollywood stars, had donated to it to help women coming forward about powerful men. I didn't know that the founder, Anita Dunn, was already working for Joe Biden. And during the time I was trying to get legal help, he donated 2.2 million to her PR firm, hired her. She became the senior White House advisor. Now, since Time's Up has been dismantled, but there has been corruption every step of the way that I tried to come forward. Then I was going to testify in Congress in 2023, and Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene interviewed me. And they were going to have me on this whistleblowers committee talking about the corruption, not just what Joe Biden did to me, but the way they tried to silence me using social media, using, illegally surveillancing me, using the FBI and DOJ and weaponizing it against me, an American citizen. And right before I did that, I had gone for vacation to Moscow, Russia, to have my book, Left Out When the Truth Doesn't Fit In, to have it translated into Russian. And while I was there, I was told by intelligence officers that if I went back, I was going to be most likely arrested. And I was told this several times by different people that I trusted. So then I called Matt Gaetz' office. He spoke to me directly with his chief of staff present. And he said, Tara, I know how these people operate. I'm worried for your physical safety. Now, remember, at the time, Matt Gaetz sat on the Intelligence Committee. So when a U.S. congressman that sits on the Intelligence Committee tells you that you're in danger, that's a very huge thing to say. That told me that I needed to stay put in Moscow, Russia. I had a very difficult time. I had just moved near my daughter. I had, I had pets, everything. I had only 5 days worth of clothes with me. So it was really traumatic in that sense. I had no plans to just stay in Russia at this point. And then I had to decide, to do that. I was very lucky that Margarita Simenon of RT, because I had written some op-eds and done some writing, because I'm a writer for them. She had said, Tara, we will never leave you. And she, really gave me a chance to have a future and said, we'll help you. Maria Butina helped me with the applying, which is complicated, for asylum. And very few asylum seekers get granted. I mean, it's like any country, it's a rare thing, but a political asylum in particular. But I was granted, FSB did their investigation, and it was granted very quickly, which tells me again that there was more evidence that, something was up. And, I was in danger in this particular moment in time when the Biden family was really trying to protect Joe Biden, protect his legacy, because I don't think he was that with it in 2023, 2024. So I think it was the cronies around him, basically. And I think that my life was in danger. There was definitely signs of that. So I got the asylum. I stayed in asylum, and now I'm out of asylum. Now that President Trump is president, I think many of the people were fired that were part of that, but some are still there. And then, recently I've had a couple of people tell me, no, they still think I'm being surveilled for whatever reason. But it's illegal surveillance, in my opinion. I've never committed a crime. I was simply telling the truth about a sexual assault. It should not have been politicized. So that's kind of in a nutshell what's happened to me. And the lawsuit is against the Merrick Garland, FBI, DOJ, the Biden administration. And we have named Hunter Biden and Jill Biden in it because they weaponized this against me. Now, this lawsuit's unique in that what I'm trying to file here, I'm trying to get my release of records and get them expunged because I didn't commit a crime. And I also don't want this to happen to another American or whistleblower. In a sense, I'm a whistleblower and I should have been protected and I wasn't. And, I feel very fortunate that, John Levy is my attorney, that I have him on my team working on this. But this I shouldn't have to be living like this. But I do. So I have chosen to stay in Russia. And even though I'm out of asylum, I feel safe here. And we can talk about Russia later, but that's kind of my story in the nutshell.
Tara, no, it's a fascinating story, and you brought up Congressman Matt Gaetz, who's I think one of the most patriotic ex-members of Congress that we've ever had, telling you that you should stay put because you're in danger. Now, my understanding is you did not testify to Congress. Is that correct?
No, they wouldn't have me. They wouldn't allow me to testify remotely. And, the whistleblowers committee didn't really move forward. This was under the Biden administration at the time, and I was hoping under Trump administration, there would be a little more aggressiveness with bringing these people to justice because your lives were affected by this fake Russian hoax by the Democrats, what they did, so many thousands of lives were affected across the world. It's world geopolitics was shaken by what happened. And there needs to be accountability. So I'm feeling very strongly that I'm going to keep moving forward with this.
Have you had any updates from, obviously the Republicans control both chambers of Congress currently, you have President Trump in office. Have you had any updates? Obviously Matt Gaetz isn't there anymore, but has any other member of Congress reached back out to you, especially as these investigations ramp up into high profile Democrats like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden and his family?
No, and I wish they would. I wish like Marjorie Taylor Greene would reach back out. I know she's being very supportive of the Epstein survivors, and she should be, and that's wonderful. But you know what? My thing shouldn't have been politicized either. And I know I'm only one person in this moment, but there were others, and they just kind of disappeared or were scared and terrorized, basically to silence. So yeah, I think Joe Biden's 83 years old. I don't know. And they already said he's not competent enough to sit trial for other things that I think were supposed to be brought up. But Jill Biden and Hunter Biden were making decisions on his behalf in proxy, and they were not authorized to do that. So I think bringing this forward will open up a can of worms, so to speak, that we need to see. We need to see what went on behind the scenes there at that White House, because Joe Biden wasn't competent at the last there, and obviously, and we need to know what happened, who was running the country, and to what extent. And I want to know, was Hunter Biden the one calling the shots, threatening me, having the DOJ and FBI go after me? So this will provide that mechanism to go forward.
Well, Tara, as a woman, I really appreciate your strength, your resilience, and also your courage to put your life on stake at risk for simply speaking the truth. And actually, they criminalize you for being the victim of a powerful man, and we have seen it in all the feminist manifesto. But when it comes to people like you become the victim. The victim become the criminal. And
Right.
And this happened at the same time we all lived this lawfare of the weaponization of our institution toward everyone speaking the truth or being in the wrong side of history, which is the right side of history. By that, I mean the courage to say the truth and not fit the narrative. We have lived it, you have lived it, but your life were at risk. You were put in the position to ask for asylum to Russia. And I want to emphasize this in the very same moment where Russia was demonized by the United States and all the Western Bloc. So you, as an American citizen, American-born citizen, was victim of sexual harassment from the former president of the United States. At the time he was a senator. You were put in the position to move to Russia, to restart your life in Russia. Don't you feel that America kind of left you behind? And how is your life now? What is your feeling about this choice?
Vero, that was very true, everything you just said. And what I would say is that the betrayal issue, right? I feel like not America betrayed me, but specifically the Biden, cronies and Biden. I feel very betrayed by the Democrats. I worked for Leon Panetta. I worked for Jack O'Connell. I worked, as a congressional. I wasn't just like some fly-by-night person. I was entrenched in the Democratic Party, and they just threw me aside and basically destroyed my life because I told the truth about one of their elites. And that says a lot about the Democratic Party. And I will never vote Democrat again. I will never have anything to do with that party. It's corrupt. It needs to be torn down to the bones. It just needs to be, completely new people in it. They keep trying to have these legacy things. Like I think they have a Kennedy running Schlossberg or whatever, Carolyn Kennedy's son, and he's wacko. If you look at some of his postings, he's not qualified to be anything. In Leon Panetta, whom I worked for, he had his son, Jimmy Panetta, who's now the congressman of the Central Coast in California. I mean, these people think that these are their kingdoms and these fiefdoms, and they just pass them down to their children like a legacy. And that's not what America's about. And I think, Donald Trump is trying, I see him trying to really pull back the curtain, and show what's going on with the deep state, but it's hard, and he's getting a lot of pressure to not do that. And you can see the pressure that he's under, and threat. And, he was almost assassinated and whatnot. And many of you yourself, George, you went through, and Rudy Giuliani went through what the Democrats call their playbook, where they villainize, destroy, and then go after you with lawfare.
Yeah.
And, it works for them. And what we need to do is put our feet down and say, no, it's not going to work anymore. Sorry, that playbook is not going to work. And now let's flip it on them and make them run to court, make them have to prove their innocence. And that's what we need to do, and bring the truth to American people. I know that Donald Trump wants to stop the endless wars, and I hope that there's peace. But what my life is like right now, which is your final question there that you were asking, I'm very lucky. I feel like a very lucky girl because, the Russian Federation welcomed me. And it's not like I had anything to offer. It's not like I had secrets to give them. I didn't have anything of relevance to tell them. They simply took me in. And I remember one person when I was going through my asylum said, you did nothing wrong. Because they're used to maybe asylum seekers, maybe having this or that, something happened. But they were astounded that I did nothing wrong. I didn't violate any laws. And I was being basically hounded to death. And so I really am grateful to the Russian Federation for giving me a life and some hope, because it was a very scary feeling to not have anywhere to go. There's only two places that don't, would not send me back to the US, and that's Iran and Russia. And luckily Russia was here. And, I've come to fall in love with it. Moscow is beautiful. The economy's good. It's peaceful. They are having the military operation with Ukraine, but I mean, inside Russia itself, it's a very peaceful place to live. It's very clean. It's very crime-free. It's very efficient. And economically, it's very easy to build your life here. And I'm doing substantive work that I like. So actually, I'm getting a happy ending. So. Here you froze. Okay, let's see. Let's leave.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so I don't know what's going on. And like something, every time we talk about sensitive things, the connection leaves us.
Yeah, okay, so where did the connection leave off?
When you were saying Russia is very safe, and then you started talking about the economy, and then you froze.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let me kind of go back and see. Can you edit it together or?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. You know, what I find is that Moscow is very clean. It's very crime-free. It's safe. You know, transportation's easy. Economically, it's really easy to build your life here. So I feel like, you know, I'm getting a happy ending where, but when I first was going through this, I was really hopeless. I was really scared. I was, you know, facing possible, they were accusing me of violating sanctions and espionage, all kinds of things that would have been decades in prison. It was horrible. And I didn't do any of it. And, you know, how do you defend yourself with something like that? So it was really scary. And now I have, I'm working with RT as their contributor, and I have a nice flat that overlooks the park, and I have friends, and I'm learning Russian, and I'm actually having like a new adventure, and I'm really loving it.
That sounds great, and it's really important what you said. That people don't understand at which extent, if it can happen to you, if it can happen to me, if it can happen to George, it can happen to everyone. And not everybody's lucky enough to have a place to receive them, to protect them. Many people are victims of injustice forever, and they are not in a position to defend themselves. So we really need to fight this, corrupt lawfare targeting everyone, going against a certain agenda. Now with Trump and President Trump in power, I believe they are taking the step toward a change. But you know what happened also at the geopolitical level? This demonization of Russia also affected diplomacy overall. Like, think about the European Union bloc. You just mentioned that it's very easy in Russia to financially to build your life. That's not easy in the European Union, mostly after we apply the senseless sanction to Russia. For example, Italy and Russia have never been enemy. Russia was our partner for gas imports forever, so it was our primary partner for this. And here we go, we apply this sanction that under which our economies collapsed more than Russia economy. So this is something that we have to look also from this angle, this agenda that, tried for some reason to demonize Russia and its president, and just portray it in a completely wrong lens. And I think Donald Trump is making a good job into reestablishing dialogue with President Putin, and just to shake off all this construction, these lies, and not being afraid to even having a relation with Russia. We can only wish to have a great relationship with Russia, and this nonsense should be over. What do you think?
You make a good point, because Italy, actually, where you are, is a little more pragmatic, and they are not as Russophobic as like Germany Great Britain, because I have met many people no one from Italy, that have sought shelter here, but from Great Britain, Germany, and different Scandinavian countries. They're coming here, Canada and the U.S. for sanctuary, for protection, or for shared values, because they feel like the value system in the U.S. and Canada and some of Europe is just, and Ireland as well, is just not their value system. So they're coming here to raise their children. So some of them are doing it for value systems, not because they're necessarily persecuted. And then you talk about Alina Lipp, who's German, who had her bank accounts confiscated because she did accurate reporting of the Donbass and told the truth about the Kiev regime bombing their own people. And she basically reported the truth, and the German government went after her parents, and she's a 25-year-old woman, and took their bank accounts, their businesses, and she had to flee to Russia. And now she's building her life, and Karin, the Austrian, who's from Austria, who was part of the parliamentary, who was very high up, who had danced with Vladimir Putin at her wedding. Just because she danced with him, Austria stripped her of her property, of her titles. And anyway, now she lives here in Russia. But
yeah, it's insanity. We don't have this feeling in Italy, and that's why it was surprising that we would even go toward the path of sanctioning.
Tara, what is the foundation of this Russophobia when you hear members of Congress, administrations on both the left and the right, always calling China the biggest threat in many ways to the United States, politically, economically, militarily, but they don't really take any draconian actions against China. In fact, they appease them in many ways. Whether it's on Taiwan, on trade deals, the repatriating of industries, unfair trade practices that, of course, President Trump is trying to correct. So why is Russia the whipping dog when apparently Europe and the United States have bigger problems with China? What's your theory about that?
My theory is that it's the military industrial complex, because weapons are so, it's very much incentivized to monetarily to produce these and manufacture these weapons. Like I mentioned Leon Panetta before, my former boss, he sits on the board of Raytheon, one of the biggest weapons manufacturers. And so of course he goes on CNN and says that we should be sending weapons to Ukraine. He sits on the board of Raytheon, he makes money from it. Lindsey Graham, they're pocketing money from it. They're using it as a money laundering thing. Russia is a convenient enemy. It's just big enough to be considered an enemy, but not like China, right? Not as big as China. So again, I think it's just this going back, pulling from the the Cold War, because if you listen to former CIA officers, they still say they have a cold relationship with Russia. Well, it's no longer the Soviet Union, and Russia doesn't want to have a cold relationship. They've been trying to be friends and partners and economically partners and innovators with America since they became capitalist, because it's more in their interests. It's not, it's practical. So for the US, though, they want that justification for $1 trillion military budget. And for that, you need an enemy. So, that's where Russia comes in. And, and then you add in that Hillary Clinton, Obama, John Kerry, that whole group, Comer, they were all very involved in the Russian hoax and Russiagate. They were all very involved in contriving things that weren't true, and they should be held accountable.
Yeah, I've always said that the Obamagate, Russiagate story was the WMDs all over again. It was a pretext, or what they thought would have been an amazing pretext to launch some sort of conflict with Russia. What better Hollywood script than Trump, a president, and his advisors being subverted by the Russian government, right? And them overthrowing our democratic process. That was what they tried to do using Western intelligence and, basically the media running with these stories and framing the president, his team, and Russia, I would argue. But for our viewers that have been inundated with so many fake stories about what Russia as modern Russia is, how do you describe Russia today? Is it a European country? Is it Eurocentric? Is it Asian? It's an Orthodox country, obviously, but Orthodoxy is an Eastern Christian religion versus what Protestants and Catholics in the West primarily view themselves as. So what is modern Russia, and can modern Russia be an ally of Europe and the United States, or are we forever going to have differences with these countries?
I think that Russia is more similar to Europe than not. Okay, you have the Orthodox Christian values. You have 1,000-year history. You have entanglements with former royals. You have, a lot of history there with Europe. The European relationship with Russia is fraught with, there's been conflict and there's been cohesion, and there's been all of that throughout history. The United States, of course, being so young, it's a newer history, and I think we can move away from, the history when Soviet Union was a communist state. They're no longer communists, they're capitalists, and they're in the new part of capitalism where, there's a lot of young people in Russia that are entrepreneurs, that are building families. And that's exciting. And it's a growing economy, even under sanctions. All it did was make Russia turn inward and manufacture more. So I think that it would be smart for the US to have a better relationship with Russia and have innovation and economic partnership. Think about if we, instead of destroying and instead of all these machines of war, think about what good we could do for humanity if we could collaborate again in space. Like, I predict a year from now, or as soon as there's peace, I predict there's going to be a joint venture towards Mars or some space exploration between Russia and the US. I think that there will be future partnerships. I just don't think it's in the practical interest to be at war. All it does is cost money and cost lives in the end. Right now, there's a short-term gain for some of these older politicians, but they're dying off. They're in their 80s, 70s. They're going away. And the younger generation just isn't interested in this war against Russia. They're not.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, you said it as it is. It's a war against Russia. We have seen using Ukraine to go at war, all the West and NATO against Russia for the industrial complex. I think they need to feed the endless wars to survive, and they had to frame an enemy. But I think the master falling, and we will see very soon a very different geopolitical balance. And I very much look forward to it, because as one of those who dare to say the truth, I'm currently in the list of enemies of Ukraine. So just for reporting about what happened there. So I wait a moment where whistleblowers and truth tellers or people daring speaking the truth will be protected and not victimized, as it happened to you twice. So Tara, thanks so much for your incredible strength. It's such a pleasure to talk to you, and we'd love you to have you on again for commenting on what's happening in this, because you are in between two worlds, and you experience daily what the fake media misrepresent as something completely different. So I think it's important for our audience to learn from people like you what is really going on in Russia, how people live in Russia, and which is the political feeling over there.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Tara. Really.
Tara, where can people follow your work and follow you on social media?
I have a link tree, Tara Reade, READE, podcast.com. And then for X, at Reade Alexandra, you can follow me. And, you know, thank you again. Molto grazie.
Grazie, spasiba.